everybody, and welcome to another episode of Death By, where contestants will earn reps for their arguments for a chance to stand on top of the podium pedestal. I am your host, Lauren Kalil. Whoever I decide has the best arguments through the final round will earn 30 seconds to talk about a topic of their choosing. Before we get into today's episode, we want to thank our sponsor, Thirdsy. This is the best thing that I have added into my routine over the last several months. It has no melatonin, it has no added sugar, and you can take it every single day to help you sleep better and stay asleep longer. If you're somebody whose mind gets wandering during the night and you just can't turn your brain off, it will also help knock you out very quickly with that delicious strawberry lemonade flavor. Some of the other ingredients that you might already be taking as supplements, but they're all included, is collagen, magnesium, L-theanine, and GABA. All in one scoop. This stuff is the real deal. If you want to get 20% off, you can just go to thirdsy.com, use code DEATHBY, and you can start sleeping better tomorrow. On today's episode, we have CrossFit Games athlete Tim Paulson and proven coach and man who's almost moving. We have semifinals athlete Ellia Miller. And we have CrossFit analyst and one of our very own, Tommy Marquez. Nice t-shirt. He pulled the Jason Hopper there with his little flick of the cigarette performance.
That's actually from Razor Ramon. He has the toothpick. He throws it at you, says, "Hey, Chico." That's what it's from. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.
He said that Pat Vellner told him to do it. So Pat Vellner got it from the wrestler.
Or Pat Vellner's playing like the funny older guy that convinces the younger guy to do the silly stuff that he doesn't know what he's actually doing. Big brother kind of stuff.
Tim, is that what you do now?
Yeah, a little bit. I could definitely see Pat doing that though, 100%. That definitely reads as a Pat move.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, glad to have everybody on the show. Let's go and play Death By. Topic number 1, the Rogue Invitational. They recently released their qualifier ranking system, similar but different to the CrossFit Worldwide ranking system. From what we know thus far, which system do you prefer and why? Tim, we will start with you for round number 1.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say that I like that they released the ranking system first and foremost, because like it always seemed a little gray how they invited athletes. So like to provide some clarity behind like, and they still put the caveat that they can basically do whatever they want, and they can, but it's nice that there's a system in place where athletes feel like they can kind of start to advance towards getting a qualifying invite. I've kind of looked through it a little bit and I don't fully understand, like there's not a whole lot of details on it. I think the one downside that sticks out to me is that there's no semifinals performance in there. So there's not a whole lot of opportunity for up and coming athletes to necessarily kind of make their way up the rankings. But I guess that's what they would point to as the qualifier being for, is that, basically like we're going to reward the top tiers of the sport so that they can get closer to an invite for Rogue. And if you want to make your way as an up and comer, you still have to do the qualifier. So at the end of the day, if I'm going to be completely honest, I have a little bit more. I think Rogue's qualifying system is probably going to turn out better because I think there's a lot more. Maybe I don't know. I trust Rogue a lot. I guess would be my final outright answer.
They have more buy-in from you.
I would. I'm actually happen to be wearing a shirt, but yeah, I would agree with that.
Teed up for the question. 3 points for Tim. Ellia.
Okay, so I think they're trying to accomplish two different things. If we're talking about which ranking system do you think is a more appropriate, like, picture of where people rank athletically here and now, I think the CrossFit ranking is more accurate. And the reason being, I don't like the 5-year look back for Rogue. I think 5 years is too far back to get a good picture of what's going on right now. I think it makes sense for what Rogue is doing because they're not trying to have the 20 fittest people in the world at their competition. They're looking for more of like, the long-term main players in the sport, where 5 years does make sense. But if you look at the 2019 games to now, the competitive landscape has changed so much that to look at who's actually the fittest right now, I don't think that makes sense. I also don't like that they didn't include semifinals, and that they're using top 20 from the games, not the whole games field, which is weird to me. If you're going to include a competition, I don't know why the bottom half of the field wouldn't still get credit for being there and competing, because making it to the games to begin with is a big deal. But the things that I do like about Rogues is the depreciation across years. So the only year that's worth 100% is the most recent year. And then every year beyond that is worth less and less, by a percentage. And I like that they're transparent about what they're doing, what they're changing, what they're considering changing, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think the CrossFit ranking is a better indication of who is the fittest right now.
4 points for round number 1 for Ellia. Tommy, what do you got? Oh, this fly. Sorry.
Oh, you're right there.
I touched it too.
Oh man. Quick hands. Nice work.
Thank you.
But I think the question boils down to me as which system is doing a better job at what it's intended to do, right? Like I think Ellia has a good point around they accomplish different things, but which one is more successful at what the aim is supposed to be? Right now, I think that's Rogue. I think a couple things stand out for me: transparency and communication as far as feedback is concerned. So, part of what Tim said is that there were some curiosities around, well, how does this work? How are these invites and things like that going out? Rogue basically lays it out there, says, hey, this is exactly what we're doing. It's in beta, so we're also willing to take feedback. Here's our contact. You can hit us up right away if you haven't already. Our last week's podcast, we spoke with Barkley Dale, who provided feedback for Rogue, and they had already implemented it in their system within a span of a few days. So I think that's effective communication. I think that's effective implementation of something where you understand that it has its limitations. You're going to grow. I think the semifinals thing isn't as big of an issue for me, given that there wasn't standardized programming across the board. So you can't really place a number. And I think in general, their system accounts for where you can equally apply programming across the board for most events. The depreciation of value is important for me, which I think if you look at what Rogue does, they try to honor the broader history of the sport as well as legacy that athletes leave behind. That's why they have events like the Legends competition. So opening up the scope of who they factor in and when makes a lot more sense for that. And I think CrossFit is still trying to get their legs of figuring out what is this system going to be for the worldwide ranking. They're even making like minor tweaks without really telling people about it. So it's kind of happening, in the dark of night, and we're just kind of there waiting, figuring out what's going on. So I think for those key points alone, I would give the edge to Rogue.
3 points for Tommy. I understand that they both serve a different purpose, but is it necessary to have both?
I mean, I almost said a line from Dodgeball about necessary that probably wouldn't.
I have seen that movie.
Yes, that probably wouldn't be appropriate for this show, but I guess both events are run independently and have a right to kind of develop systems for themselves that they think is going to be most effective. So I actually think there's no harm in that. And it's probably better that we get a multitude of systems, maybe even competing systems that people can pick apart, look at, tinker with, compare, contrast, and hopefully, like, who knows, we could take pieces of both of these, create some sort of Voltron system, power up and defeat the big bad guy, which is trying to have a fair and comprehensive season across the board as a result of both of these.
I mean, it's also nice too that
I think
Rogue is Rogue is taking into account obviously the invitational. So it's and that's kind of what everybody, I think, in an ideal state would like to see from CrossFit is, again, like some kind of impact of your worldwide ranking because of your performances outside of the linear CrossFit game season or an expansion of the season. So this is at least like a nice step in that direction. And again, maybe yeah, maybe Rogue and Wadapalooza and whoever else get together and they start to intermix, and there starts to become this broader kind of like ranking that gets you into multiple events because, especially when you're talking about these events outside of the season, it would make sense, not from my perspective as like former athlete, they're like, yeah, if I do well at Rogue, that might benefit me. Like if I do well at Rogue and in the season, maybe that should benefit me towards my Wadapalooza qualification rather than, again, just kind of having this gray system where Wadapalooza invites are again, like there's not really a system. So I like that side of it a lot as well.
And I think the more different versions we have of some sort of ranking, ultimately the worldwide ranking from CrossFit is what is, currently most important for our sport because that's the CrossFit season. But having all of these different versions are only going to inform the CrossFit worldwide ranking system to hopefully take lessons from what the other systems are doing, what's good, what's bad, and implement the good, stay away from the bad.
So if, as you guys were speaking, Tim specifically, as you were talking about potentially having, Dubai, Wadapalooza, these off-season competitions using a system, should they look at Rogue or CrossFit?
Oh, definitely. I would say definitely Rogue. I mean, I don't know, CrossFit's system. I think CrossFit system to me, it's like the end goal of CrossFit system seems to purely be figuring out allocation of spots to the games at semifinals. And like, granted, there's obviously like the flip side of that is like, yes, you need to figure out who's the fittest at given times, et cetera. How strong is the region? But I guess that feels like the end goal. Whereas like I don't know, to me like Rogues, Aaliyah had mentioned, and it is accurate. I think that like CrossFit gives a better picture of who's the fittest right now. But I feel like Rogue takes into account again this kind of like, if you have an injury year, granted that year is worth less, but it still reflects on your history as an athlete and your ability to accumulate points and things like that. So I think there is definitely some benefits as well to having a 5-year look back because again, if you have an injured year, you get sick at a major competition, there's a little bit more wiggle room to have those things not, completely blow up your ability to qualify for an event or something like that.
And Rogue implements the exceptions for that. So if you had a year or like for women, if they're pregnant for a year, or if you go team, CrossFit just takes you out completely. But Rogue has, I don't remember exactly how they do it, but it's like they take a 3-year average or something like that, and they fill in those gap years with like the average of your other competitive years.
Okay, let's move on now to topic number 2. Semifinals is obviously over. We're getting ready to go back in person for the CrossFit Games. But of the 3 weeks of semifinals, which athlete has added the most stock, raised the most stock when it comes to their performance? Ellia, we'll start with you on this topic.
Okay, I would 100% say Haley Adams. I think a lot of people counted her out this season because she took a season off. And I think people thought that the reason she took a season off was an indication that she wouldn't be able to come back and be as good as she was or better. But I think the East semis really disproved that. And I think she came back and made a statement. To be the only female in the East that was able to beat Tia on anything is incredible. And she had some really phenomenal performances, and even the snatch ladder, like obviously she's been working on her strength, which is super cool to see such big improvements on something that was previously one of her weaker areas in CrossFit. And I am really excited to see her not only qualify, but I think she's going to do very well at the games.
She's definitely going to be in the conversation. 3 points for Ellia. Tommy, who's your athlete?
It's an easy choice for me. A guy who went in the final week of semifinals and nearly upset the champ at his semifinals. That's Dallin Pepper. To me, it's not a matter of if, but when Dallin wins the CrossFit Games on the men's side for me. You look at his body work that he's put together. He was the most successful teenage athlete of all time, winning 3 straight. He took a little bit longer term approach in terms of breaking through at the games. And that path wasn't without some adversity. He was in a qualifying position early on in 2021 at the West Coast Classic. I got to call that event. Some mishaps with the sandbag and a few tough events on the back half knocked him out of contention. But slowly you look at what he has been able to do in the few years since breaking through. You set these reasonable targets for yourself as an athlete. Top 20 first year as a rookie. Yep, did it. Make a jump into the top 10. Yeah, goes top 5. The third year at potential at the games for qualifying. He does so, but then he stands toe to toe with guys like Roman Krennikov and Jeffrey Adler, who have stood on the podium, and guys who are realistically going to be his adversaries at the games when we get to Fort Worth. And what does he do? He closes the weekend with a second, third, and a first. All top 3 finishes, outduels all 3 of them when the chips were down, including an event win to catapult him and give him a shot at winning overall. You talk to anyone from that brew camp. I spoke with them way back 2021 on the early iterations of what that brew camp was before they had the Naples and then Jacksonville. Everyone said Dallin is the steady hand. He is the leader. He is the guy that everyone looks to, that is even keeled and understands competing, is calm, collected, and knows how to compete at a high level with the maturity beyond his years. And so for me, seeing him put that into execution at the semifinal level, not backing down against the best, and then looking at what he's done year to year at the games, I think it's only up, and I think he's going to walk away with a podium finish.
Okay, Tommy, you're going to the casino and you're going to bet on the year that Dallin Pepper wins the CrossFit Games. When is it?
Do I get like a range? Because usually at the casino they give you like, hey, 1 to 3, 3 to 5,
plus or minus 1.
I think it's more than 1. I think maybe 2 years, 2 to 3 years he'll win. Yeah. I think this year. I think there's something to be said about some athletes. It's just almost being their time.
Yeah.
And I feel like Dallin has such a long road ahead of him that this is not saying that he's actually going to consciously say, hey, like, I don't necessarily need to like push a little extra here, because I think he's going to leave it all out on the floor. But there's a little bit of aspect for when athletes who know their windows are closing that puts in a little bit of extra something. I liken it to Ben Smith in 2025, right? Or 2015, sorry. We knew that like that was just Ben's year, right? His window to win was closing, and we knew Matt was going to have a long road ahead of him. I think we're in a similar scenario for that.
Okay, 4 points for Tommy. Tim, who do you got?
Well, I give props to both their answers because I was way short on Haley Adams going into the East semifinal, and she impressed me leaps and bounds. So like I was 100% wrong. And Dallin Pepper was definitely on my radar as well, just as like for all the reasons Tommy said, going toe to toe with some guys that are incredibly impressive. But for me, I guess like I don't know, I got 2, but the big one is going to be James Sprague. I think just again, the guys that he was able to hang with all weekend long, the areas that he was able to show improvement in, specifically on the strength related stuff. He's always been very good at some of the engine focused stuff. His gymnastics are very solid. So like I don't know. There's definitely like he to me, just like watching him go all weekend long. You're like, you going into the snatch event. I'm like, all right, like maybe he's gonna drop a couple cards here or something like that. And it's like, nope, did great. Like didn't win the event, didn't touch and go 265 like Colton, but again, like very much held his own against some guys who are, are going to be very respectable in that event, or an event like that at the games. So Sprague definitely increases stock tremendously to me. And I have to give a shout out to Vellner because knowing what he was dealing with kind of behind the scenes going into that weekend, the fact that he is so fit and just like mentally dialed in that he, with everything that was going on, he was still able to pull out a 4th place finish. And like, I mean, I think you roll the dice any different way, and Pat wins the West Coast Classic pretty handily, I would say. So I got to give Pat a shout, but Sprague is my, he's my ultimate, I guess bullish on him at the games.
3 points for Tim. Will Pat Vellner ever win the games, or will he keep coming just short?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to count Pat out because like so kind of like Tommy was saying, it's like you feel like some people's windows are closing, whatever. It's like I don't even honestly think Pat's windows closing. I just think you can only punt it into the stands so many times before you finally put together all the pieces, and it just feels like he's just consistently had that one little, fuck up or whatever my language. Like, I just feel like Pat is gonna put it all together one weekend. It is going to happen. I would be shocked if a guy of his presence of mind, his fitness, all of these things didn't eventually find a way to put it all together and be in a very legitimate contention for the top spot at the end of the games. Could it be this year? I mean, honestly, yeah. I mean, I would not put it Pat. Like I've been high. I would be Pat's one of those guys. It's really easy to be high on, but I think moving to Texas, having some more events inside, whatever that does to the programming, maybe we take out some of the potential for that gigantic blunder a little bit, maybe. But yeah, I'd still be pretty high on Pat this year.
He's won everything
Okay.
else. He's won
Yeah.
literally
Yeah, I mean, literally.
everything else.
He just
It's
needs
that-
one games without some major equipment malfunction or something.
Before we move to the last topic, which we'll spend a bit of time on, I want each of you to rank your athlete on where you think they're going to place at the games. So we'll go in reverse order now. So Tim, James, we won't even talk about Pat. We just said.
I mean, I put Sprague around I put him low teens this year. I put him in that 11 to 15 range. I think he has probably his most bang up year as an individual at the games, but yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a top 10 year for him just with how strong, some of the other guys in the field are, but I'd put him in solidly inside the top half, 11 to 15.
Yep, you're up next, Tommy.
I'm going to put down third.
Third.
And I honestly think he I wouldn't be surprised if he finished second, but at third seems Ricky coming back, Roman, Jeff, Justin looking great again, Pat, Brent, all of those guys. I think you could put him into a Yahtzee shaker, and any combination that comes out would be fine.
And Ellia?
This is a
Where's
bit of a
Haley?
risk to say because traditionally the games tends to be heavier, but I think Haley can be top 5.
Nice. Okay, we're going to put a little marker in this audio track so that we can circle back after the games. Cool. I love that. Let's now move on to topic number 3. Everybody loves to talk about what they would do if they were king or queen of CrossFit for the day and all of the new implements they would make. But if you had just $1 million to invest in CrossFit, which might seem like a lot of money, what would you do with it? We start this round with Tommy.
Well, I think I gave you a stat earlier when we were prepping for this show because I wasn't going to be on it. I'm the emergency goalie this time, coming out of street clothes to join the show. For reference, I back in the day when I worked at CrossFit, the salary budget for our studio team was less than that. Well, less than that, less than $750,000. So you could have a full studio team, not counting what expenditures would be, assuming you already had infrastructure. But regardless, what I would do immediately, first thing I would do, I would call all of the big agents in the sport. I would call all of the representatives and leaders of each of the major athlete camps, as well as major head coaches. And then I would call Marston and Heber and their squad, and I would get them on the phone and figure out how can we put together a content strategy for highly produced, in-depth documentary style series for the season with all of the major players and get it distributed on a platform like Netflix, Amazon, Apple Plus, primarily Netflix, I think, a la Full Swing. So how can we leverage all of these and strike a deal where the 1 million will go to, the operating costs and any of this costs associated with producing it, and as well as figuring out a way to make sure all of these camps and athletes benefit accordingly once it does get distributed. The reason why I'm going to Marcin, Heber, and their team is because they have as much experience as anyone in this space working with the distributors producing this type of content and putting it out on those platforms. I want to say it's 5 or 6 best-selling documentaries on iTunes all time, is on top of all of the stuff that they've been able to produce since. I know their Buttery Bros channel has taken a slightly different spin on that, but if you go back to Road to the Games content, long form documentary style content, fittest on earth stuff, the Froning, even what they're producing, going to be producing in the future, which I don't think I'm at liberty to say. There's some good stuff coming. They know how to do it. They can get the right people together. They have great relationships with people across the board, and they can act as de facto executive producers to make sure if you have to partner with other content creators to make sure it happens under budget.
So then you're saying the training camps would get payouts, and would those athletes get royalties, or is that
yeah, so
something
that would be
something
part of
different?
the discussion, right? Like, how do we offer money out of the budget straight up for some of the major players and how they ultimately end up in the show, or do we offer royalties and pieces of the pie once the show gets distributed? That's a question for the agents and for the athletes. But I think the big picture, I think with $1 million, you can get people into the room and get the wheels churning on that, and hopefully maybe getting some partnerships and sponsorships along the way that maybe allow that to happen a little bit more, knowing that their athletes are going to be featured in a really big way. I mean, look at what Full Swing did. Look at what Drive to Survive did. I think those have helped launch. I don't want to say they were fringe sports because they were very, very big in their own right, but they pulled more mainstream eyes and made more casual fans out of people across the globe.
4 points for Tommy. Do we know if anybody's doing a doc at the games this year?
There was a documentary team that was there that was outside, that wasn't involved in the sport previously. They were supposed to. I was told, and what we were told on the broadcast was that they were going to be able to turn around a documentary within like a month or two after the games. Now I'm hearing it's not going to come till maybe around the games. I just know that they asked me to sit for an interview at 8 a.m. the morning after the Sunday of the games,
Yes.
and that was not the business. I'll tell you that.
Not the preferred time or day after working the CrossFit games and then maybe having some delicious beverages after.
Yeah, I look like Tim Paulson ran me over with an air bike.
Tim, what are you doing with $1 million?
ETFs. No, I think it's like so I love Tommy's idea. Like, and it's funny because I actually went like, I kind of took it as like the affiliate side of things, because when we said CrossFit, like I'm still very much of the mind that CrossFit the sport and CrossFit the affiliate, the methodology needs to kind of split up a little bit more. But I think again, to me, it all comes down to like $1 million in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money, but it's enough money to get some damn content created. And I guess for me, it was a very similar thought process, like doing more to like highlight and truly push the affiliates, the methodology, like getting in, telling the stories of everyday members, of gym owners that are doing cool things. And like similarly, like trying to get that into like wider platforms. Like these lifestyle story type things are very popular nowadays. Like people are doing, like there are some series and documentaries out there that I don't understand why or how anybody would ever want to watch them. And I feel like the powerful stories of CrossFit and transforming people's lives in the affiliates, whether it's the owners, the coaches, the members of the affiliate, all of it top down, people would eat it up because everyone loves a feel good story. And I feel like these are like, you could easily make a 6 to 8 episode mini series, put it on Netflix or something like that. And it's just like, hey, here's how this methodology, this community changed people's lives for the better. We've got endless documentaries about all of these cults and how they basically ruined everybody's lives. How about we make a documentary series about a cult that, kind of saved a bunch of people's lives? It only seems to make sense to me. So I don't know, like I said, very similar thought process to Tommy without all of the details, but I still think that, like, again, it's just how good would that be? Like a CrossFit 6 or 8 episode on like Netflix about just like, hey, here's how these people, this methodology, this community changed my life for the better, and I lost a bunch of weight. Like all those things. It's like, I don't know. It just makes a whole lot of sense to me.
We'll
So
title
you're
it.
thinking, go ahead, Tommy.
We can call it, but it's a good cult. The CrossFit.
Exactly.
The best
Exactly.
I always love a
Kool-Aid
good
from
cult
the best
documentary.
cult. So do I. They suck me in every time.
Oh, we that's like the only thing we've watched since we've had children in the last 3 years is like an occasional cult documentary. That's the only thing we have or make time for.
So in this cult documentary, this is focusing more on the everyday CrossFitter, or would you blend the everyday CrossFitter with like some games athletes, or what kind of structure would that have, Tim?
I mean, I guess I don't know. My bias would definitely like initial answer would be normal, like normal everyday CrossFitters. But again, I think it is like, it's a dying era. And like, Ben Smith was one of the big ones where like, he was involved obviously at the games on a high level, but also owned an affiliate, trained with his members, all of this stuff. Like there are very few people that did that. And I think it could be in my mind, I initially thought about this as a methodology booster more so than a sport booster, even though obviously they do go hand in hand. But I think again, it would be very cool, like, to highlight the games athletes that were doing it all at the same time, like that, and they were deeply engrossed in the methodology beyond just the sport and working out really hard. But I obviously also have a personal bias to that for obvious reasons. So like that's obvious. And I'll call that out as I see it.
5 points for Tim. Ellia, what are your thoughts with 1 million?
All right. So full disclosure, I am not a finance person or a business person, so I have no idea
either.
what $1 million could actually do. But I would also be going the media route with this. But I would start with just an actual full split of CrossFit methodology and CrossFit sport. I think that they no longer can function as the same business because they almost always have conflicting interests about what to do with money. And I would honestly invest most of the money into CrossFit sport, which sounds counterintuitive to what we think CrossFit stands for. Tim's talking about telling the story of the average everyday CrossFitter, the, 60-year-old that walks into a gym and CrossFit changes their life and all that kind of stuff. And those are really cool stories to tell, and it's really inspiring. But I don't think that that's what's going to get people long term into affiliates. If you look at, the major sports that we have, football, baseball, basketball, kids don't want to play football because they watched an inspiring football documentary. They want to play football because they see their favorite players on TV every Sunday for 18 weeks. And because they see the cool documentaries like the quarterback documentary on Netflix, or, we've got the Drive to Survive Formula One documentary. Like they want to see the stories of these people that they look at as like movie stars or their idols, and that's what gets them wanting to play the sport. So if we're looking at how to get especially the next generation of CrossFitters into the gym, it has to be with the kids. And the way that we get the kids in is to get them excited about it. They get excited by sport, they get excited by excitement. And if we can find a way to capitalize on that, I think that we can get, like I said, an entire generation wanting to do CrossFit.
5 points for Ellia. It's interesting because I assumed that Tommy was going to talk about content because we work in content. We know that the push that it can have, but it's so fascinating to me that all three of you want to invest the $1 million in content. Tommy?
Well, I guess this kind of spurned something this is thanks to you both really, but I think about some of the stuff that are some of the great content that already exists. And Tim thinking about it from the affiliate side had me thinking, why not? I'd almost be pivoting a little bit on my original thought, but let's look at TV spots. Like let's look at ad commercials. Let's take the Constants episode, the Grandma Betty TV spot that were essentially formatted for live commercials and television way back in the day when they were created. And like let's throw some money at putting them on network syndication and putting out ad spots for major TV. Like I think I know television ads can range anywhere from hundreds of thousands of dollars to, $5 to 10 grand, depending on the spot. But if we think about our target demographics a little bit, and you can be smart about where you place those ads, if anyone who works from home and has maybe the TV running in the background knows that there's plenty of life insurance ads, medical equipment ads,
Fast food.
injury law firm ads that just run roughshod over all these people that are feeding like the aging demographic and even the young demographic that's at home on those watching TV. Like we could easily get some CrossFit ads up there as well. So maybe that's another option if we're diverting it to the affiliate programming side. Take some of that core, what we used to call core CrossFit content, and there's tons of it that's already been produced, and go put them on national television.
Can you guys hear me? But my video is horribly delayed. Is that what's going on right now?
Yes.
Just a little
Okay, all right.
choppy.
Whatever. Yeah, man, I think honestly, like I like Aaliyah's answer a lot because again, I think there does need to be a future for the sport. You know, like there needs to be a future. Like we need to kind of drive that next generation. But to me, like there's still so many things that need to be figured out about the sport itself before we like worry about creating a next generation of the sport. It's like there's a lot of things to shore up before we worry about, you know, getting more teenagers to start doing CrossFit. I think that's a downstream issue to be solved that we got a lot to figure out before then as far as sustainability goes and structure and things like that. But I do love like the concept behind it is like, you know, knowing a lot of the games athletes, like the more exposure they get, the better, because a lot of them are hilarious and awesome to be around and really easy to like, you know. So it's like the more that we can put them out there, the better it is for everybody, the sport and the methodology, I think, honestly.
Yeah,
This
and even if it's not getting kids into competing in CrossFit, it still gets them into a CrossFit gym. So even if the competitive side of CrossFit isn't, you know, fully figured out, which who knows if or when that'll ever happen, it at least gets them into a gym. And then they discover the methodology. So now we're using the sport to grow the affiliate side. And it's not necessarily just to grow the sport, it's to get people into gyms.
this might be totally out in left field, but what would it take to get high schools, elementary schools, some kind of schooling environment involved with CrossFit, like having it be part of the PE program? Because I just think of like the different blocks that we would go through. There would be a swimming block and then a running block. And would there ever be potential for a CrossFit block in schools?
It's happened at a couple places.
Mm.
There's been elementary schools and middle schools that have created like nonprofit affiliates. I
Oh,
think it
yeah,
also
sure.
exists at a couple colleges. From what I understand, it's a very, very big struggle in terms of budget and insurance. Because you could do CrossFit without equipment, but it's just limited in what you would be able to do with it. But the other big thing is insurance. I remember reading an article about, I think it was like a middle school that set up a CrossFit gym inside their gym, and they went through a massive headache of trying to get a rig set up because I think it had something to do with like the way that it was drilled into the floor. The insurance wouldn't let the kids use it or something like I don't
Yeah.
remember exactly what it was, but it was complicated.
Yeah, there's some drama around. I mean, once you get the insurance and the red tape of a school administration involved, it's going to be tough. I mean, Clark County School District I want to say in the outskirts of Las Vegas, Nevada, has adopted CrossFit as part of their physical education program to great success. I don't know if that's the same one that has recently run into issues, but you also run into the potential, and this is where CrossFit has to step in. Yeah, create the avenue for schools to do that. But then CrossFit has to be at the forefront of being an advocate for those schools and getting the ball across the finish line, right? Because as soon as that becomes word around the block, you're going to get everything from like glowing press to negative press across the boards. I mentioned Clark County. You know, one of the first things that comes up when you look up their physical education program is this local news station basically like saying, hey, they have adopted CrossFit as their school program. And then the subtitle is, but is it safe?
Oh,
Immediately creating
God.
doubt around the possibility of it. And if you go down the article and you have anything to do with that program, you'd understand that it is a glowing success. They're getting kids moving, they're getting kids active, they're getting kids across the board. So much so it was so popular that they opened it up to teachers too, so they could get teachers working out with it. And yet there's always that little underlying thread of like but is this safe, or is this right, or is this dangerous, when the average person is ignorant to the fact that like most of the activities you're throwing your kids into, whether it's a high school strength and conditioning program with some PE teacher who like couldn't teach a power clean, like they're just loading metal plates up. It's like, okay, yeah, you're okay with that, but not this. There's a lot of issues with that, and that requires CrossFit to like really be out in front leading the charge.
I don't know what credentials any of my PE teachers had when I start to think about the people teaching me fitness growing up. Last question, and then Ellia, we'll move you to the podium pedestal. Since we all agreed, the three contestants agreed that media is where you would invest the money, would CrossFit benefit more from just hiring their own media team again?
I mean, I think yes, but also like they need to the top down needs to show the interest and the drive and the vision for that. It's like that's why I would jokingly invest in ETFs or the government of Zimbabwe, is because it's like I don't know if CrossFit the organization sees the value that the rest of us know is inherently there. It just seems to be a hard conversation to have, that we have all the time, is like they just seem to be trimming it up constantly instead of actually investing in spreading the message of what we all do and love and know. And again, like if that's not your job, what is really? Like, I don't know. So
yeah, I mean,
yes, they should, but I don't trust them.
Yeah, the piggyback off of that, like if the people at the tip top and the people controlling the money ultimately decided they wanted to, you would have to make sure that the right people are in place to lead that team too. Because I mean, I've said this before. CrossFit had what 50 people at the games on the media team, and like what did they produce? It's like there is like this constant like political struggle behind the scenes of people like fighting for their little fiefdoms that I think gets in the way of the bigger picture. So you'd have to make sure that the right leaders are in place, and it would probably involve bringing new leaders on the media side to make sure that they're going to actually execute on this vision.
Okay, Ellia, the champion of this week's Death By. 30 seconds, topic of your choosing.
Well, speaking of media, I just want to give a shout out to all of the third-party media sources in the CrossFit space that are continuing to provide the content and provide the information. Everybody knows that CrossFitters love everything CrossFit, and we eat it up every second we can get. And if we were solely relying on CrossFit to produce that right now, we would all be starving. So just I don't think this sport would exist where it is right now without the third-party media right now. And I don't think the CrossFit methodology would exist where it does right now without the third-party media. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
I was going to say also to the third-party broadcasts from like South America and all them too. That was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, they crushed it. South America had a drone following people out in the run. It was great.
They stepped it up from past years.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but with Torian, we expect them to have a really good broadcast because they have from previous years. But the other regions, they stepped it up and they provided some great coverage. So, yeah, I would second that. But anyways, thank you guys for joining us on another episode of Death By. Thank you to our sponsor, Thirdsy. You can go ahead and click the link in the description. Use code DEATHBY, Thirdsy.com. Sleep better. Knock out for 10 plus hours. Sean still only gets 5, but that's better than when he was getting 2 before he took Thirdsy. And we will see you all next time.